Ladies and gentlemen, the goal in your life is not to figure out how to be comfortable in your mental prisons, but to realize that you have the keys to set yourself free. Hey everybody, welcome to How to Be Mesmerizing. It's Tim Shurr, and today we have another legend in the house with us. Seth Godin is here. Seth, welcome to the program.
Well, thank you for having me, Tim. It's a pleasure to talk to you.
The pleasure is mine. So for anybody that doesn't know Seth, Seth is a Rhodes Scholar. He is one of the sharpest minds on the planet, and it really is insightful when it comes to understanding human behavior. He's in the Marketing Hall of Fame. He's written 18 best-selling books, 19 pretty soon with his new book coming out called The Practice. Make sure that you grab that and add it to your collection immediately. So Seth, let's go ahead and jump into that brilliant mind of yours. So what would you say are 2 or 3 bits of wisdom that you've learned through your journey so far? Things that you really have learned and you believe thus far are a fact.
Well, so the thing about common sense, of course, is that it's not very common. And we all have pieces of wisdom that we carry around. The question is, where's the wisdom that is counterintuitive? Because sharing the, don't stick your finger in a pencil sharpener rule, that's not helpful because everyone knows not to do that. So I would say the first one is that failure is dramatically underrated. That failing appropriately is the only way forward. So what do I mean by appropriately? I mean, not failing at something that takes you out of the game, not failing in a way that hurts other people or is ungenerous, or selfish. What kind of failing then are we talking about? Picking the smallest viable breakthrough and seeking to deliver it and then learning when you don't. And I would say that I have failed more times than most people, and that has made a huge difference in my life. And then I would say the second piece is that tips, shortcuts, and tricks are hardly worth your time.
Yeah, that's very good advice. So let's talk about the first tip. So I agree. I always tell people there is no failure, only feedback. And the more feedback you get, the faster you're able to grow and learn and discover, which is really good. And your biggest breakthroughs are hidden in the places you don't want to go. And why don't you want to go there? Because you're afraid you might fail or be embarrassed or look bad. But if you are able to get over that ego part and have the courage to go in those places, that's where you find your biggest breakthroughs. So, and I love the idea about and I know you've said this a lot, and as an authority on marketing, people should really take it to heart that all these ideas and campaigns that are going to help you to get rich quick and all these shortcuts to success, it really isn't. I've interviewed some of the most successful people on the planet, and they don't have any real secrets. They have some lessons they've learned, some principles like discipline, right? And do what you say you're going to do, things like that. However, we're hoping they're going to give us some magic pill that's going to unlock everything, and it's not really there.
No, if it was, everyone would have taken it already, and then it wouldn't be worth very much.
Yeah, that's right. Then it wouldn't be a magic pill. So what was something that maybe you used to believe was true, but now you've gotten older and hopefully a little wiser, and now you don't really buy into that anymore?
I used to think that the fancy people were more interesting than they actually are. And, we've created this culture that celebrates the fancy people. And, you don't need to go to TED to find people who are interesting to talk to. And you don't need to be backed by a venture capitalist to build a business that's worth building. And you don't need a Pulitzer Prize to be a good writer. So those signals can sometimes be a useful shortcut. Like I never would have met Sir Ken, may he rest in peace, if he hadn't been a TED speaker and he and I were, spent a couple of days together in Italy a few years ago. So I'm really glad that the famous people spotlight was on him. But most of the time, you're like, really? Really? That's all you got? I'd rather spend time with people who are kind and interested and interesting than people who got picked by some system.
That's really good. You know, I think one of the reasons why people love you so much, Seth, is because you're so down to earth. I mean, with the accomplishments that you have and the things that you've been able to do in your life, it's pretty remarkable. And yet when you speak, you're coming back to the same, you know, hometown values that you grew up with, right? About being kind and being compassionate and being thoughtful and being respectful. And you just always bring it back down to earth. There is an old expression that says, beware of meeting your heroes, right? And my wife likes to say, you need to write a book called Don't Peek Behind the Curtain.
Yeah, you know, I'm obsessed a little bit with The Wizard of Oz. And there's almost every scene in that movie is a metaphor that's useful. What's interesting about the wizard is that the man behind the curtain, when he was pretending to be the wizard, wasn't much of a guy. Mm-hmm. But afterwards, when he got rid of the subterfuge and he was able to be the person he wanted to be, he was one of the heroes of the movie.
Yes.
And I think that all of us deal with imposter syndrome. All of us deal with feeling like a fraud and a fake. And one of the ways that I deal with it is I just don't take myself that damn seriously. Mm-hmm. Because if I do, then I get all stuck. And every time I find myself wanting to say, don't you know who I am? I realize that's what someone who has amnesia should say. And everybody else should say, how can I help?
Oh, that's really good. I'm sure you weren't born that way. You had to go through these phases, right, to get to that kind of selfless or others focused space. How'd you do that?
Well, everyone's born naked, unable to walk or ride a bike. So we develop skills. And I think it's a trap to wonder about the origin story of people whose skills we admire, because your origin story is different no matter what. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, Wide World of Sports loves to talk about how this person, you know, this lucky break when they were 4 made them into the world's best golfer. So therefore you can't be the world's best golfer. And I don't think it's fair or useful to let ourselves off the hook. I think it's way more interesting to say, how do I get on the hook? How do I find enough difference among people who have achieved something to realize their background doesn't matter? So yeah, I won the parent lottery. I'm a person of privilege. I'm healthy. Every day, I'm thankful for what my parents taught me. But you didn't have to win the parent lottery to make a difference. And on, right? My friend Liz Jackson, who's, you know, battling physical disability, is an extraordinary human being. And yeah, I could beat her in a running race, but she could beat me in 400 areas that matter. So I don't want to look at someone's background or their appearance and say, well, that person got it, because I don't buy that.
Yeah, I agree. And it reminds us that, you know, because we're always focusing on what we don't have or what, you know, are inadequacies because of that deep down fear that I'm not enough. That's the biggest fear that drives all the insecurities in the world, that somehow in some way I'm not enough. And I don't want you to know it though, because then I won't be loved, you know, which is the other big fear. And so
yep.
I finished a book called One Belief Away with Joe Vitale. And in it, I remember asking him once, I said, Joe, do you think that some people are just luckier than others? And he said, well, I hesitate to answer that question because there's so much victimhood in it. However, the real question should be, do you want to be one of those lucky people? Instead of feeling like, you know, there's lucky people out there, just tell yourself, I'm one of them. Right? And walk around believing that I'm one of these lucky people. And then all of a sudden you'll start thinking, feeling, and behaving in that way. And I thought it was sage advice. Yeah.
Well said.
So there's some things that you've learned. I mean, you've written a lot of books. I know you had your 18 best-selling books, which is incredible. And before then you were creating a lot of books, and now you have your newest one. What have you learned through that writing process? Because I know in our 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, we continue to evolve. How have you evolved in writing all of these books?
So I only took one English class in college. My high school English teacher wrote in my yearbook that I would never amount to anything. So I'm not a natural writer. when I became a book packager, my vision was to write with idiosyncrasy and to be peculiar and stand for something. And it became very clear that I could not do that and be commercially successful. And so I wrote the Smiley Dictionary and the Business Almanac and the Celebrity Almanac and books on gardening and stain removal. And I was a chameleon. I could make a book on a topic then and make it a bestseller or not, but the quality of meeting spec was there. Mm-hmm. And when I went out on my own with Permission Marketing, which was my first New York Times bestseller 20 books ago, I decided to go back to what I set out to do in the first place, to write and design and market a book that was one of a kind, because I didn't want to be one of 100 or one of 1,000. Mm. And so the lesson learned, particularly now, since you don't need a publisher to say yes, is you need to write something that people would miss if you didn't write it. Mm. And writing another version of somebody else's book isn't helpful to anybody.
Yeah, I agree. And it also seems that you write the book that you need the most anyway. Right. So often, the person
I write for myself, without a doubt. I write for myself.
Yeah. Yeah. It's such an accomplishment in learning to be able to actually write, because it does take discipline. It does take time, and then once you have the book out, then you've got to go through the editing and everything else. So it really is a process, but through that you learn and grow, and you can't grow and have all the wisdom that comes from it if you don't take the journey. So, which is cool. So at this point in the game, you ever get scared anymore? And if you do, how do you handle it?
Well, I only get scared if I'm doing something that's important. And so if I don't get scared, then I have to have a conversation with myself about why I'm not doing something that's important. And I tell the story of training for a marathon. If you're going to hire a coach for the marathon, you don't say to the coach, how do I run the marathon without getting tired? That's a stupid thing to ask, right? Like the coach would laugh at you.
Right.
So don't ask somebody how to do important work without being afraid.
Yes.
Because that's how you know you're doing important work. So when the fear shows up, I say, thank you. Thanks for reminding me that I'm doing something that I'm glad I'm doing.
I think that's what really does allow you to stand out from the crowd, is that you always show up with an answer that's opposite of what everybody thinks you're going to say. I love it. You do it continuously. And I think it's just who you are. You're not even doing it on purpose. That's how you think, which is why it's so refreshing. So
yeah, I got to interrupt there. I don't buy either of the last two things you said. Somebody who rides a bicycle really well, that's not who they are. It's a skill.
Okay.
And having this gentle, contrary nature to help people see things differently, that's not who I am. That's a skill. I just decided to be good at that by practicing it.
Again, such wise wisdom. And thank you for the clarification. I appreciate that. It's huge. And I hope everybody really gets that your main point is that we often think that, people who are successful are just lucky. They were born that way. They have these skills, they have these talents. And what you're saying is, no, they've developed them, right? They've honed them. They've focused on instead of spending time telling myself why I can't accomplish things, I just focusing on developing the skills that will help me to accomplish those things.
Yep.
Yeah. All right. Very good.
Right. And then, I've been thinking about the name of the podcast. I think what we know, someone asked me a question about how do we bring more personalization to marketing? And almost no one cares about personalization. The fact that your name is written on the shirt, or, that something was made just for you. But we care a lot about things being personal. And what makes it personal is not that the person talking to us is being personal about them. It's that they're being personal about us. That we don't want email. We want me-mail. Everyone wants to read me-mail. And
that's awesome.
What makes somebody mesmerizing is they are speaking to us in our language, on our frequency that resonates with our story. And you can't do that for everyone. And that's why seeking the smallest viable audience, not the largest possible audience, is essential. And in fact, in the age of the internet, the only thing you can do. It's tempting to say, I want to be the next Kim Kardashian, but we already have a Kim Kardashian, which is plenty. So you don't get to be the next one. but you could be the next you if you could find a small enough group of people to be it for.
You know, there's an old joke in the psychotherapy field, which is my background. They say we're going to start with 30 clients, and 30 years from now, we're going to retire with those same 30 clients. Right? That was the old model. But I love what you're saying. I 100% agree, because in this age, we are, especially if you have a business or you're into providing services online. I hate to say internet marketer, but if you're reaching out to customers through the internet, the idea is that you have to keep finding more and more and more. So you have to be on all the social media channels, and you've got to constantly be posting 3 times a day at these times and these days. And I heard you say, you know, that doesn't matter. And I really agreed, because it's exhausting and it waters down the message that you could share, because you're just trying to get stuff out. And so having a smaller group, as they say, riches in the niches.
Well, you know, there's a con in social media, which is that if you are using social media for free, you're the customer. You are not the customer of Twitter or Facebook or Pinterest or any of them. You're the product. Mm-hmm. And they are trying to make you insecure, trying to make you sad, trying to make you hooked, so you'll come back so they can sell you again. And as soon as you realize you're doing free work for Mark Zuckerberg, it gets way easier to say, there's nothing in this for me. Mm-hmm. And so I don't use Twitter. I don't use Facebook. I don't use LinkedIn. I don't use Pinterest. I'm okay. Yeah. Right? Build what you want to build for the people you want to build it for, and stop worrying about interrupting strangers.
Boom. I dropped the mic, but I need it. That's good. That's very good. So you've already given a couple of marketing tips, but since I have one of the world's most well-known marketers with me here, you got a couple other ideas? I know you've talked about focus on your audience, you know, give quality information, make it about them, tell them stuff that, you know, interests them the most. Other ideas?
Yeah, I want to clarify. I don't think any of those things are tips. I think those are universal truths that don't change over time. A tip is you should tweet at 2:00 in the afternoon on Thursdays, because that's the day you'll get the most traction.
Yeah.
So what other universal truths matter? Smallest viable audience. When in doubt, look for the fear. Why is that customer hesitating? What are they actually afraid of? Realize that while people like to say they make rational decisions, no one does. Because if we ever met 2 people who made rational decisions, they would always do exactly the same thing. They don't. Because human beings make up stories about what we do, and the stories are our version of reality. They are not actual reality. We don't know what reality is. Yeah. And that doesn't mean science isn't real. Science is real. Mm-hmm. And if what you are doing is working, that's science. Mm-hmm. If you're doing things that aren't working and denying it, that's delusion. And figuring out your path forward by creating opportunities to help the people around you get what they want makes it more likely that you get to do it again.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Very good. Very good. Yeah, it's really important. And a lot of times people feel like, well, I am focused on my customers. I am focused on caring about them. But secretly, most are not. You know,
it's a simple test. Simple test for you, Tim.
Okay.
If a customer asks you for something and you know of a competitor that could do a better job, do you give them the competitor's phone number or web address? If the answer is no, then you don't really care about your customers. If the answer is no, you're just saying caring about my customers is a good way to make money. But if you say to a customer, I do that, but this person does it even better than me, that is what you say. So, you know, if you think about the book industry, we blurb each other's books all the time, right? You can find my name on the back of more than 150 books with me saying you should read this book. Tim Cook does not blurb Samsung phones. He just doesn't. You're just not going to go buy an Android phone that says, Tim Cook, CEO of Apple, I like this phone a lot. No, he doesn't do that because he needs you to buy an Apple phone. And blurbing other people's books is a symptom of generosity and surplus. Whereas if you need your customers to know less than you, you're doomed because your customers know more than you. And one quick fun test, the next time you go to buy a car, bring a laptop with you, sit down at the desk, open it up and ask what the Wi-Fi code is. And like, as the salesperson's talking to you, you're just visiting other dealers. Game over.
That's right. That's good. Yeah, that's sage advice. I remember one time I had a couple that came in for some coaching, and I realized after our first or second session that I was not going to be able to serve them in the way that I wanted to. And they felt that way too, and they weren't sure how to bring it up. And so they didn't have to. On the following session, I had a check waiting for them, and I just refunded them and told them that, and it was at a time where I did not want to refund them, but I knew that it was best for them. And they were so surprised and so blown away that I didn't try to lock them into a contract or anything else. I wished them the best, you know, and they went on their way. And I got 3 or 4 clients from them. They became one of my best referral sources, even though I didn't help them, right? Because of the, you know, being for them. Yeah.
Exactly.
It was so good. All right. So I'm curious about this one. Who have been some of your role models, people that you look to for guidance these days?
So I wrote a blog post 7 or 8 years ago called Mentors and Heroes. Mm-hmm. There's this perception today that you need a mentor. Mm-hmm. And if you think about what that involves, it's this person who you believe is more powerful and successful than you, who's going to drop everything, coach you, help you, make decisions for you for free. Mm-hmm. You're not going to find a mentor. That's like a dream. But heroes are easy to find because you never need to meet them. In fact, it's probably better if you don't. But you can say, what would this person do in this situation? Yeah. You can ask yourself that question anytime you want without their permission. Yeah. And I have been lucky enough to meet my heroes and do projects with them. I did a project with Isaac Asimov. I published his book from Zig Ziglar. Mm-hmm. I did 5 books with Jay Levinson. Mm-hmm. But I got more out of every one of those relationships when they were my heroes, because that stands for something. And in my case lately, I would say there's 2 buckets of people. They're the people in our society today who are standing up for racial justice, for Black Lives Matter, who are trying at great risk to themselves to make things better. And there are my readers and the people in the Akimbo workshops who each are doing things with the ideas that I never would have expected. And watching them expand horizons and make a difference inspires me to do better work, because I know there are people who are counting on it.
Yeah. Yeah, it is very exciting to see where people take the ideas and the inspiration and what they do with it, you know, and come up with stuff that we could never have dreamed of on our own. And that's the exciting part about it. So providing the tools and then support, and then watching the collaboration and the innovation that comes from it. It's awesome. Is that what was one of the reasons why you decided to provide the AltMBA?
So the AltMBA is a 30-day workshop we run. We're in our 43rd session. It's only 120 people at a time. Mm-hmm. It's intensive. I'm not in it. There's content from me, but mostly it's project-based with coaches, and it changes people's lives. Yeah. 5 years ago, I sat down and I said, a lot of people are trying online education. Online education meaning you get a prize at the end, not online learning where you actually learn something. Mm-hmm. And I said, in the massive online courses, there's a 4% completion rate, which means that 96% of the people drop out. Yeah. Now, try to imagine a lecture hall at a fancy university where there's 100 people in the first class and 4 in the last class, right? They'd shut the place down. Yeah. I sat down to say, what could I build that was contrary to the conventional wisdom, that would show people they actually could learn things online, that would change lives, that would help people learn to see, make better decisions, level up, that people would stick with because they wanted to, not because there's their certificate. Right. So we have a 97% completion rate, not a 4% completion rate. Wow. And it goes really deep with a lot of people. We have 5,000 alumni in 80 countries. Wow. And the people who take it, some have MBAs, some are trying to replace an MBA, but it has nothing to do with an MBA. It just has a bad name. And it's designed for people who wonder when they wake up in the morning, there's got to be more than this. It's about addressing that question and helping people level up. And then because the AltMBA was so successful, we said, how do we make something that's more broadly applicable, that's more, maybe a little more tactical, that's a lot cheaper? And so we run the marketing seminar, the creatives workshop, freelancers and bootstrappers, and some new ones coming, because I am a teacher. And if you go to the library and read my book, fine with me. If you steal one from a friend, fine with me. But mostly I want you to change. And the best way I know to change people is with enrollment. And the best way to get enrollment is in these online settings.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, a lot of learning is just memorizing and forgetting. You know, it's not actual application and then getting feedback and then becoming.
A lot of education is learning and forgetting.
Yeah, the whole
But
school.
learning is about confronting incompetence through action and then not being incompetent anymore. If you're going to learn anything, you're going to become incompetent for a while because you realize you don't know how to juggle, and then you do, right? And I am not high on education right now. I think education is overpriced and promises too much. But learning is what is the only place hope comes from.
Yeah. Learning is the only place hope comes from. I love it. So you ever find yourself in a rut? And if so, how do you get out of it?
Yes, all the time. I think the hardest part of my work is exposing myself voluntarily to discomfort to do something that might not work. And what I found is if I am too fearful, then I stick with what does work, and that's known as a rut. So a rut is a symptom that I'm not being brave.
Oh, Seth. That's a t-shirt, brother. Oh my God. I felt that one all the way through. Wow.
Thanks,
a rut
man.
is a symptom of not being brave. Woo. That's a good one.
Sorry, let me get rid of this. I apologize.
No, you're fine.
All right, I'm back.
Okay, cool. So that was a good one. So, you know, you've been around the world. You've had all kinds of cool adventures. Is there one particular adventure that you've had that really stands out as like one of your top ones?
Almost none of them have to do with airplanes. I have traveled more than most people, and I haven't been on an airplane now for 6 months, and I don't miss it one bit. So I'm going to broaden the definition of adventure just a little bit. Okay. I think that in Kibera, which is in Kenya, there's a slum with 2 million people who live in it. And I was invited by a group, I believe called the Kibera Boys Book Club, to come talk about the book Linchpin. And there were 40 people there. They make on average $3 a day. They had read my book more closely than any group I had ever spoken to. And I still remember that day. I still remember hearing from so many of them in the years afterwards about what they're building and what they do. And, you know, it's super easy to use the word privilege and just sort of dismiss it. But these young men had nothing we would call privilege. And yet they figured out how to shift their attitude. It was thrilling. And that was more than 10 years ago. And I still remember it like it was yesterday.
Yeah, it's incredible. It really does give you a whole paradigm shift when you're actually somewhere else and you are hanging out with other people and you look at their circumstances and they might be standing in a place where we might consider filthy and they're smiling. They have the most genuine smile. And then it's like we're complaining because our plane ride was too long, right? And so, yeah, that's amazing. I mean, that is very powerful to be able to even think that people, you know, somewhere like that are reading your book, you know, and using your book as a guide to transform their life. That's a pretty big deal. It's a small world. Yeah, that's amazing. All right. Well, we talked about adventures. Who's one of the coolest people you've ever met?
Oh, I don't even know what that question means. Isn't everybody cool in their own way?
Oh, I love it. Yeah. Yeah.
Like my fourth grade teacher, who I didn't appreciate at all at the time. Now I recall that every single day she wore shoes that matched her dress. And she had dozens. And that's something I would want. But what an interesting hobby to be a fourth grade teacher and invest thousands of dollars in hundreds of pairs of shoes so that each one matches a different dress. You know, everyone's got their own thing.
And to remind us how cool that is and to appreciate and value people and the fact that you noticed it, right? I mean, that's huge. That's the best answer, Seth, I've ever heard. Because usually people will think of some celebrity or somebody that they know. And I love what you just said. And it causes us to pay attention. I have this acronym. I call it LOVE. We need to walk around loving people. LUV. It stands for listen to, understand, and validate, right? And so we walk around loving on people. And when you do that, it causes you to have to focus on that other person, what they're going through, what they're wearing, how they're talking, how they might be feeling, asking questions to understand where they're coming from, and then to offer compliment, you know, instead of criticism, and a kind word or phrase. It's so powerful. And yeah, every example you give is an example of how to do that, you know, with grace. So super good. So I know, I already kind of know how you're going to answer this then, but I'm going to ask it anyway. So once you achieved a high level of success, was it what you thought it was going to be?
There was a level of success I achieved when I was able to build a stable home and have a family that I loved, and it was significantly better than I ever expected. When I reached the level of success of a stranger recognizing me on the street because they saw my TED Talk, like, whatever. I wasn't doing it because I thought something cool would happen, but nothing cool happened. It's fine. Yeah. I don't go out of my way for it. It gives me no pleasure. It's the cost of being in the world and being a teacher.
Yeah. So many people sacrifice the stuff that they ultimately want for that fame and fortune, you know, without asking themselves, why do you want the fame and fortune?
Yeah.
And so, yeah. So let's talk about your book, The Practice. In that book, you said a couple of things that, of course, make so much sense after somebody talks with you and meets you, right? So, but you mentioned that leaders are imposters. So can you clarify what you mean by that?
Sure. So imposter syndrome is something most of us have felt, feeling like a fraud, feeling unqualified. Who am I to be here? And people say, well, how do I get rid of imposter syndrome? And I'm saying, unless you're a psychopath, it's good that you feel like an imposter because you are one. And the way that you know you're an imposter is you are describing a future that hasn't happened yet. You are leading, not managing, leading, showing up and saying, over there, we should go over there. It might be better. Do you know for sure? No, you're an imposter. You're acting as if, with generosity. You're doing it for other people who are voluntarily following you. That is very different than saying, I am a kidney surgeon. I will do an operation and you will survive. Someone who says that to you should be really sure it's true, right? Not like, oh, this is my first surgery. We'll see what happens. But for the rest of us, if you're a leader, you can't be sure because that's what it means to lead, is that you're not sure.
Yeah. I think the word that if we had to describe you in one word, it would be generosity, because you use that frequently, right? That word generosity, of spirit, of thought, of kindness, you know, and then taking a look at the things that people are most afraid of and then showing up with a generous smile. You know, you are an imposter, and people will be like, what? and then to laugh at yourself and go, oh, I guess I am then. But you're doing it with a generous spirit, a generous heart, and it breaks the spell of fear, right? And
Exactly.
allows you to be able to really be there for yourself and others. That's
exactly
really good.
Right.
Yeah. So, you know, where can people find this new book of yours?
So wherever finer books are sold, which is running out of places. If you go to seths.blog/thepractice, you will find an excerpt from it. And you can find our workshops at akimbo.com.
Outstanding. So 2 more questions for you. If you could travel back to when you were that 4th grade boy, learning what you know now, is there any advice that you would give him?
So I won every lottery, and I'm really happy today. And that's only because of all the failures. It's only because of all the dead ends. And so I wouldn't go back and change any of them, however painful they were. Yeah. So I guess the only thing I would say is it's going to be okay.
Yeah, that's really good. You know, we all have failures and pains. You have found a way to move through them, though. Did you feel like it was because you were on a search and life is a school? Or do you feel like you had no other choice? Or was it driven from, you know, in the beginning, from anxiety? You know, I have to figure this out. I got to pay my bills. Maybe a little bit of all of it.
Yeah, I do not want to minimize the biological origins of real trauma for a lot of people. And I don't believe in talent that much, but I do acknowledge that trauma is real. And because I've been so privileged, I haven't had some of the traumas that other people have had. I've had, you know, really lucky sorts of dead ends and heartbreak and going for years, almost missing payroll and practically going bankrupt, but enough of a safety net that I could navigate it. And I think that I didn't give up because the alternative was to become a bank teller. And I knew that if I became a bank teller, I would never recover. And so this desire to be heard, to help, to turn on lights, that's enough to get me over the hump most of the time.
Yeah. Yeah, that desire for something more. So I know you don't know a lot about my background, but I spent 20 years specializing in helping people to overcome those big T traumas, right? And the post-traumatic stress from wars and all kinds of horrible things. I have enough horror stories in my head for a lifetime. And what I've learned is it's not what happens to you. It's the how you interpret it. Right. It's what you think it means and the belief that comes from it that influences you more than anything else. And I've seen people go from victim to victor just by shifting the belief and what they thought it meant. And it was the most beautiful thing I ever saw, which is why I continue to do it today. Yeah.
Well,
Seth,
thank you for leading and for caring.
Yeah. Well, right back at you, brother. This has just been absolutely wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing all this wisdom and care. And you know, it is interesting because, and I'll make this last point, but it is interesting because you are a marketer, right? Like one of the best in the world, but you don't talk like one at all, right? You have this kind, gentle, like, come, let's give Seth a hug, you know, kind of this feeling. And, which probably was what makes you the best marketer ever, right? But it's just, and it's genuine because you are full of generosity and love. So thank you so much for being a part of this program today. I really appreciate you being here.
Well, thank you, Tim. It was a pleasure.
It was outstanding.
Perfect.
Thanks so much. All right, you take care. We'll talk soon. Well, there you have it, everybody. Seth Godin. Holy cow, that was an amazing interview. So I really recommend that you go to Seth's blog. If you just go to Google and type in Seth, S-E-T-H, he pops up everywhere. He's been in the game. He's been blogging since 1998. He has over 7,000, probably more than that, posts right now in his blog. And he is just a wealth of information and knowledge and love and care. So check out his new book, The Practice. You can go to Amazon, get a copy of that. Make sure you share this with your friends and loved ones because this was a really powerful, meaningful interview. Make sure you subscribe and review, because those reviews allow us to continue to shine brightly and take these insights and use them to make your life mesmerizing. Thanks so much, everybody. Talk to you soon. Hey, would you like more free tips on how to be a mesmerizing leader? Then check out mesmerizingleadership.com and also hang out with me on Facebook, facebook.com/Tim Shurr. Thanks so much and make your day a sure success. Hey, it's Tim Shurr. Would you like to learn my best secrets for how to be mesmerizing? Then head over to www.survivingtothriving.me. That's www.survivingtothriving.me. I'll see you there.